The remedy. The remedy. What's underneath the situation you don't realize? So let's examine with a critical eye. Put on your glasses and let it magnify the truth that lies hidden under all those lies. Cause everybody has nobility, and if you look beyond what your eyes can see, you'll see they're just like you and me, and now we're giving you the remedy. Welcome to the Remedy Podcast. This podcast is a project of WEBB Squared, a North Carolina nonprofit that works to increase wealth for Black businesses through connection, network, and opportunity. Our host is Stephanie Terry, the Executive Director of WEBB Squared, and our co-hosts are Associate Director Rinnie and myself, Mashallah Salaam. I am the Media and Production Specialist. In this podcast, we hope to bring consciousness to the racial divide and speak on emerging new narratives about race. Thanks for joining us today. We hope you will enjoy the podcast.
Good morning. Good morning, Mashallah and Rinnie.
Good morning.
How are you today, Stephanie?
I don't know, feeling weird. I have things to write and do, and I'm awake, and yet I'm feeling a little dreamy.
Like sleepy dreamy, or dreaming like looking into the future and seeing yourself in, a different place at a different time?
No, totally sleepy dreamy.
Okay.
Rinnie and Mashallah, how are y'all feeling this morning?
I actually feel good this morning. I woke up a lot earlier than what I expected, so that was good. I took a Zumba class yesterday, and that was fun.
Ooh.
Zumba. I did Zumba once.
Yeah.
That was the hardest thing I ever did.
Yeah.
I could not follow those people because they were just so fast, and I'm klutzy, and it's just like by the time I got the step down, they were doing something else.
So we had some technical difficulties this morning trying to locate stuff on our drive, and sometimes our computers get all buggy and crazy.
Now that you mention that, technical difficulties, that actually reminds us of our topic and how, sometimes humans can go through our own kind of technical difficulties when it comes to the programming that we receive throughout our lives. So today's topic is actually about letting go of identities that don't suit us and how to recognize when we need to redefine ourselves and reprogram our minds.
That is an awesome topic. So yes, and that was very, very well said, Mashallah. Yeah, how do we jump into this? Letting go of the identities that don't suit us. I mean, we may need to do like a 2-hour podcast if I can write down all the crap, all the people I'm not.
It does seem to me that oftentimes when things happen to us, like if we lose somebody who's really close to us, or we lose a job that we've had for 20 years, or we, just find ourselves like, who am I? Like, that's usually when people stop and start redefining ourselves. But I wonder if there's a way that we don't have to use something traumatic or traumatizing, where we can, like, when we start to recognize that something doesn't suit us, like, how do we reset? So we're not waiting until something really bad happens.
Yeah, that's a good point, Rinnie. I think, how do I think about this question or this topic, letting go of identities that don't suit us or our dreams? That's like a really, really heavy question to unpack, because I know for me, I have learned who I was the hard way by experiencing painfully who I wasn't. And there's got to be another way. We shouldn't have to just learn through trial and error of pain, right? I think that if we leaned into the things that actually make us happy, and like, have the courage to follow that thing or those things, then we could probably get to our true self and identity with much less pain. But the catch with that is a lot of times the things that make us happy don't necessarily make other people happy, or the people that care about us, like they may see, it may be completely opposite of what they see or say who we are. So it gets tricky.
Yeah, because not only do we have certain definitions about who we are, the people in our lives have definitions about who we are too. So when those two conflict with each other, I know from experience, like when I've had periods in my life where I'm sort of redefining who I am, that I get pushback from the people that love me, going like, what are you doing? Have you gone crazy? And that's kind of painful, because you're going through this thing and you're like, oh my gosh, I see myself in a different way. But the roles that people have ascribed to you are still those, still in play. And, cutting through that noise to really center yourself when people are opposed to your redefinition is really difficult.
Yeah, when I think about what you just said, when other people define you a certain way, but you want to define yourself in a way that you feel suits you the best or will help you to be the best self that you can be, it almost feels like you have to live in a delusion in order to get to that point, because you're hearing pushback or you're hearing people describe you in a way that you just don't see fitting in your life anymore. And so it kind of reminds me of that saying, like, fake it till you make it. But yeah, what do you think about that, like living in almost a delusional state until you feel like you have the confidence to express who you feel like you truly are?
I think you just welcome us to the reality of about 90% of the population. Unfortunately, Mashallah, so many people are compelled for really powerful reasons. I'm not necessarily saying that they're good, to live lives that are not necessarily the thing that they want to do. They feel like they have things that they have to do because of the responsibilities that they have. Mm-hmm. And that when it gets to that, like when you've got children or you've got, hopefully you're sacrificing yourself for things that are alive. How about that? First, let's start there, because I know so many people, and at one point even including myself, that sacrifice themselves for the things that they have, versus really living into who they want to be. And I'll share, I'll never forget, we were in Food Lion. This was like maybe 30 years ago. I'm 50. Yeah, I was in my 20s. And I was visiting my mom, and we went to the grocery store, and I was really upset because I didn't have enough money to pay some bill and something bad was going to happen. And I was just like in a tizzy and a fit. And my mother, she was putting the carts back. She probably does not remember this because she was just being herself. But she said to me, don't cry over the things that can't cry over you.
Wow.
And I was just like, whoa. And in that one sentence, she was telling me to like look at my value system, and like it, that it needed some serious introspection. And I never forgot that day. And it didn't happen that day, but it happened over the course of a lifetime, that I really began to rearrange and reorganize like what really mattered. And I've learned that what really mattered is me feeling good and living into my truth, and working from that as I really unpack who I really am, and not prioritizing how other people think about me or what other people want, and it definitely not putting material things ahead of my me understanding that material things actually come from me being happy and not the other way around.
Yeah, I love what Stephanie's mom said, and I think that's such a powerful statement. And I think that it really has like a calming effect when you realize, like, yeah, you don't have to cry over these material things. And then I also thought about that, and I was thinking that that could also apply to people as well, and not just things, because there are some people in your life who might not care about you, and then you're trying to force a relationship or a friendship with that person. And it's like they couldn't care less if you were in their life or not. So it's like, yeah, you don't have to cry over those people either.
Yes.
Yeah. I think it's interesting that, and you've touched on this in previous podcasts about education, Stephanie, how we don't teach these deep, heavy, soul-searching questions of identity and how to navigate the interior world in our school systems. It's more about learning facts so people can go and join the workforce. And I just wonder if there was a way that we could, because I feel like what happens is that people go through their 16 years of school, and then they're just kind of released out into the world, and they haven't been given the inner skills to navigate. I bet most people graduating from high school don't even know what their key values are. I've done a lot of value work over the last 10 years, but that's like my midlife kind of stuff. That's not like if I had some kind of deep value work when I was in my early 20s, when I first left home, I wouldn't have had to struggle as much as I have had,
Mm-hmm.
And usually that deep value work comes when you've been disappointed, or your life has changed suddenly, or, something happens that propels you into a new direction, and you have to really define yourself in order to live into that new direction. And I think that our work at WEBB Squared is doing just that. We're going to provide the coaching and the mindset training for people. I guess maybe I just wish I hadn't had to wait till I was in my midlife in order to learn all this stuff.
Yeah, you're not the only one, Rinnie. And that that deep value work, I've never heard it put that way, but it is. It's what actually is your value system? Because where does that, when we don't bring that to the forefront of our consciousness, that work happens, but it happens through the kind of the silent but powerful socialization of our culture, right?
Yeah.
It definitely happens through church and religion, and then but if you are not understanding that that's what's happening, when you look at television, or when you whatever that is, just go out about your day, things like peer pressure come up, or people go to church every day, and through all the religions, you usually leave with the sense of some sort of guilt somewhere, that you're not good enough, that you'll never be good enough. I definitely, maybe I may be wrong, but I probably am. So let me just talk from my own experience, is that, some of the values that you get from church in particular, in, religion in particular, is I haven't felt necessarily come out feeling more powerful, or come out with more agency to actually address my inadequacies. I kind of got the feeling that I have these inadequacies, and if I'm good, then maybe God will help me. And then so you get all of this okay, well, I need to be a better person, and you just, I have, not now, but I can remember a time when I was just really feeling I just didn't deserve. Because of being human, you can always look at all of the mistakes and errors and stuff that you make on a daily basis. And it didn't necessarily bring a closer relationship to God. It brought it brought a very tense and kind of fragile and kind of vulnerable relationship. So all that to say is that deep, what did you call that, Rinnie?
Just deep value work.
Deep value work is something that is so needed as we understand who we are,
Yeah, because, in some of the mindset work that we've been doing in the trainings and workshops, we've talked about how 90% of our behavior and habits and everything are informed by our subconscious, and all of those things that have come before us that has a play in how we behave. But I would almost like to say that a lot of the values that we live through that influence our life are subconscious, unconscious too. I think I mentioned a couple weeks ago, like unpacking this value of abundance. I didn't realize like how much the value of scarcity plays in my life. I never would have thought that that was a value that influenced me, but I'm pretty sure it is now, because there's just a lot of messaging from childhood is about like not having enough. There's not going to be enough. There's not going to be enough money. There's not going to be enough respect. There's not going to be enough love to go around for everybody, and that tension around scarcity has played a big role in my life as far as why I am where I am. And trying to come to terms with that, journaling about that and stuff has been a real eye-opener. But that's all been subconscious values that have influenced my life as much as, anything else. So
I think it takes a lot to unpack a lot of the trauma that you may have gone through during childhood, because a lot of the time you might forget exactly where it stemmed from. But I think there are certain moments that replay in your head, moments that you can remember that have a huge effect on your adult life that you might not realize are affecting certain things because they might seem unrelated. But then when you get down to the root of it, you realize that those things are really connected.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you add the layer of race, and racism, and like what values a race constructed society has grown and influenced the culture and all the experiences that people of color, deal with, it can be really overwhelming because there's just so much intersectionality, between like your social class, your gender, your race, like all of these things. And when we don't like think about what it means, it can just like live really subconsciously or unconsciously, but have like really powerful impacts. And it's no wonder that, I don't know what the prescription rate is for like antidepressant pills, but it's no wonder. It's no wonder that people are fraught, because we have all of these just ways, we just have a culture that really maintains the invisibility and powerfulness of that's informing our identities that are painful and that are confusing us. And so it would be like having all of these seeds in the ground, and you keep like trying to focus on, well, I planted this like fruit tree that I love, all these beautiful flowers, but it's like all these weeds keep growing around it, trying to choke the shit out of it. If you don't weed, and you keep pulling the weeds, but if you don't get at the root, they just keep coming back, and then until it looks like what I'm looking outside right now, just used to be wonderful square patch of a garden that looks like just a neglected patch of weeds.
I think it's interesting you mentioned, the antidepressant medication, anti-anxiety medications, that it's not only like a mind thing, it's also a body chemical thing.
Yes.
That these traumas, these things that have happened to us in our lives have created chemistry that doesn't like sync up with our brains in order to make us feel healthy.
Yes.
And so it's like, it's not just like a deep value mind exercise. It has implications for how our bodies are receiving the chemicals that need to keep us healthy. This is just an aside, because it's like, kind of mysterious to me how it all works together, but it's also a chemical imbalance. I wonder how much of our, maybe all of our society problems are chemical imbalances.
No, like seriously. And I wasn't trying to make light of it. I mean, just like in all transparency, I can remember like in my 30s and probably 20s, 30s and 40s, like I just got a handle on myself. Like I was saying, the past, I'm 53, so like in the past 20 years. But up until that time, I mean, so there's like mental illness, which is a real biochemical thing. But then there's like the phases and stages that are like right up to it. So you don't necessarily suffer from mental illness, but like you're not that many steps away. And living in that state, like where you don't necessarily meet the, recommendation for like some sort of medical intervention, but like you suffer from, anxiety, racing thoughts, panic attacks, like just kind of like this generalized fear, and you feel really vulnerable. Like I lived that, like it's not fun. It's not fun. It's like, it's an awful state of mind. And when I think about how I got through it, I had like lots of support from people I could just call, because it wasn't like I could go to a therapist, but I could just call people in moments, and I felt like they had a stronger sense of self than I did during those times, and they just kind of share with me like tools. Like one of my girlfriends who she passed last year, but I will never forget when I was in one of those states. I don't know what I was anxious about, but I think it was about like, I was always anxious about losing people's love. Like I wasn't good enough to be loved or something around that. And she said to me, the people that love you. And it has nothing to do with what you do. It has everything to do with just who you are. And that doesn't mean that you're like always perfect, but they just love you, and they will love you regardless. And she said, and I'm one of those people. She said, I don't care if you disappoint me sometimes or show up or not show up or whatever. I'm never going to stop loving you. And I was just like, what? I didn't think that was possible. Like, you assign that to maybe like your mother, maybe your mother, because you're fortunate if you can assign that to like one of your parents, because everybody doesn't have that. Like I didn't have that with my father, he felt like that, but I didn't know that was he felt like that. So, but to just like really know, and that was the thought that she planted in me that I would go to when I would get in those states that would make me feel better. And I was like, nope, the people that love me, and it's okay. So it's just, we don't talk about these things. I feel a little like, wow, Stephanie, you're really sharing, but it's when we don't talk about these things that they just, they just kind of live inside of us in our each unique ways, and they become like just more powerful. But if we begin to like unpack that, and do this like deep value work earlier, right? Maybe we'll start to get different results. I think about, you know, in America especially, you know, if you're not like 17 or 18 or 19 or 20, and you haven't figured out like everything you want to do with your life, then you're like considered, well, what's wrong with you? And I wish we could like compare it. You know how many adults that I know that are in their like 30s or 40s and they got the degree. If you talk to a lot of Asian young people, and that in the culture, it's like a drive to be like at the top of your education. And if you're not like a doctor or, you know, a scientist or, you know, engineer, then you're like a quote unquote, you know, you not a failure, but essentially like, well, what are you doing with your life kind of thing. But when you talk to people who get to 30 and 40 and they got the degree, they got the big house, they got the fancy job, and they're not happy, you know, or if they are happy, it's not necessarily fulfilling. And it's because they've been living into an identity that is not necessarily their own or true, but that they've been living up to the expectations of whatever has been, you know, surrounding them. And so it's just something to think about.
I was just thinking how, you know, the way our society is structured, like we go to college and then we get like $40,000-$50,000 in student loans that we have to pay back. So that means we have to enter the workforce, and you know, that keeps people from like being able to go off and do some exploration and figure out who they are. It keeps the society running the same way it's always run. So then we're kind of like stuck having these identities that maybe don't suit us, but you know, we've never been taught that we can like redefine ourselves and have dreams of our own. You know, we just are just trying to pay back our student loans. And then we buy a house, and then we have a mortgage, and then we have to pay that off. So we have to work.
Yeah. It seems like with all of that, there really is no room to redefine yourself. It's like you must choose the right career path. And then right after that, if you have loans, then you have to go right into the workforce. And even if you don't have loans and you don't have a support system, then you have to be able to afford your own apartment or house. And these days, apartments can go up or past $2,000, depending on where you live, if you're in an expensive area, or like even, you know, 1,000 or over 1,000. Then you might have to have a roommate. Then you got to check for that compatibility. And then, you know, a roommate might come with their own traumas, but that's another, that's another thing. But it really doesn't seem like there is any room for that nowadays. And, you know, people who do have the support system and supportive parents who understand that are very lucky. And I mean, that's also if you get along well with your parents. So, yeah.
And in the midst of all of this unknowing, which is life itself, there is an amazing safety nest that we can all rest on. Y'all are gonna crack out when I say this. I'm laughing about it before it even comes out. But I call it the negative times a negative equals a positive clause. Which in math, do you remember being in math? You'd be like, why does a negative times a negative equal a positive? If anyone, I wish we can talk to people if they could answer that. But, you know, I'm not saying that I have the answer, but a negative times a negative always equals a positive. A positive times a negative equals a negative in algebra, right? And a positive times a positive is a positive, but a negative times a negative is a positive. And that's, I think, because life, the system, like underneath all of like the socialization program and maybe the cultural programming and then your own thoughts about who you are, and underneath all of that programming, there is the original design. And that is the original design programming of the creator. And it's always positive. So that's how you can take a negative and then add some shit to it. And things will grow out of it. Literally. Literally.
Is that why things have to fall apart before we can put ourselves back together?
I mean, yeah, literally, like the waste, the manure is fertilizer.
Okay.
Is it not?
No, you're actually like supporting this whole idea that things have to fall apart before we can let go of identity.
I mean, well, maybe that's just the quickest way, maybe that's just the quickest way. But I mean, at the end of the day, if you look for it and you allow it, you actually can grow from your painful experiences, and you can actually use pain to grow from, which is what we're here for anyway, and to love. So I don't know if I just contradicted myself or what, but who knows? Is this for entertainment purposes only?
I mean, we were supposed to come up with a remedy.
Oh yeah, we are, right? This is the remedy.
It's not just entertainment, it's the revolution.
So if you take one thing away from this conversation, let's drop our little remedy pearls.
My takeaway is just to embrace your humanity. Don't negate the path by saying, oh, if I should have done this, I should have done that. You just go through it and know that you don't have to go through it alone. Your message from your friend is true, that the people who love you are going to have your back. And don't be afraid to talk. I mean, the whole idea about the revolution, it begins with dialogue. Don't be afraid to share with people like what you're going through. And those who love you are going to help you get through it. That's my takeaway.
So I'll continue with my stupid analogy of the little seed buried in the dark, damp, moist earth covered over with manure. That little seed is you, and that environment that feels lonely and smells like shit. Let me stop being silly. I'm just saying, I think what I would take away is that just live your life and feel your feelings, and all of the feelings, because if you honestly just like do that, life will have a way of meeting you in your moments. If you just can remember that, in those moments, you will begin to emerge who you really are. And but it requires one thing, and it requires a desire to actually want to change. If you don't want to change, then you'll miss those moments. But all you need to do is want. You don't need to know how. But if you just want to change and you want to be better, trust me, you're not alone.
Yeah, I guess I'll say it's okay to redefine yourself if what other people's perception of you no longer suits you or fits what you want to be, and that, to do what's best for you, and know that, the main goal is that you want to be happy and to heal that inner child that might have went through certain traumas or things that are still affecting you in your life today, and that it is possible to change the past through your own thoughts.
Thank you, Mashallah. So that's where we are today, y'all. Next year, we may give you completely different advice. We may have a completely different remedy, because we're still emerging our own selves. But for now, all is well. We've been chit-chatting and welcoming all of you into our minds, into our worlds, and just think about that. Think about what your values are and how you can work on emerging your own identity, and maybe even thinking about more deeply who you are today, because this is the work. And I think that work is actually a part of the remedy. So we will hopefully find our spreadsheets so that we can be back on track with all the wonderful planning of our amazing podcast. If I can call it amazing.
You can call it amazing. I think it's amazing.
I think so.
This space is actually becoming very sacred to me.
Oh,
Conversations.
Mm-hmm.
So
me too. And Mashallah, we missed you last week. Oh my gosh.
Oh,
We so missed you.
yeah.
So, it's good to see you today. But Mashallah, you want to close us out?
And as always, the revolution begins with the dialogue.
Yay! Y'all have a good week. We'll see you next week. Well, we're not seeing anybody. Well, we'll see you two next week, and we're actually not listening to anybody but ourselves too. Well, we'll do this next week.
All right. Signing off.
Signing off. Bye-bye.
This has been a joint podcast of WEBB Squared and Afro Future Productions. For those of you interested in learning more about our work at WEBB Squared, you can find out more at webbsquared.org. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. This is our conscious conversation. We hope you will subscribe today on your favorite podcast platform. Join the Remedy Membership Forum on Patreon to join us monthly for our members-only discussion. That's it for today. Until next week, thanks for listening.
What's underneath the situation you don't realize. So let's examine with a critical eye. Put on your glasses and let it magnify the truth that lies hidden under all those lies. Cause everybody has nobility, and if you look beyond what your eyes can see, you'll see they're just like you and me, and now we're giving you the remedy. The remedy.